To the Middle East now, and Israel has cancelled planned talks in Washington after its biggest ally abstained from a ceasefire vote at the United Nations Security Council.
The United States has a veto, which is previously used to block 3 ceasefire resolutions. Let's speak to Yoram Kafino from Jewish News UK, as well as the former Defence Minister, Sir Gerald Howarth. Gentlemen, good morning. Thank you for joining us. Yotam, let's start with you. They've abstained, the United States. Can we get a bit more detail on this? Is that just posturing, or is that where we're at? Are they still providing arms? What's the situation, my friend?
No, they're absolutely still providing arms. They're still supporting Israel. But, of course, this marks a change in their diplomatic handling of the situation. The fact that they're abstaining means that the Security Council resolution now passed. And that's why Israel, or at least Netanyahu, the Prime Minister, is so angry with this. And the US still did criticize the resolution. The fact that they didn't vote yes was because the resolution does not condemn Hamas, and it also doesn't call on Hamas to lay down its arms, but it did abstain because it wants to see a ceasefire. Now, the reaction from Prime Minister Netanyahu is very childish, and he is creating an artificial issue between the US and Israel by, first of all, canceling a delegation's visit to Washington, but also simply attacking the United States for abstaining. It's very, I wouldn't say unusual of Netanyahu, but it's something that doesn't serve the interest of Israel when he does that.
Just bring in Sir Gerald Howarth. And Sir Gerald, lovely to have you on. The thing from my point of view, and everybody has an opinion, is that we've talked incessantly about the horrors of October the 7th. We've talked about the humanitarian crisis. We've talked about how globally the situation and the, I think, reaction has changed. But Netanyahu seems to be, in a period of time, becoming a person not on his own, but he's becoming increasingly isolated. And many people that I've spoken to, Jewish people from England, who would be appalled by what's going on, are also saying, this man is not only responsible in terms of being in Israel for what happened, but is only in power because essentially without the war, he's gone. Do you think this is likely to be more about Netanyahu going forward? Because I would have thought yesterday was quite seismic, unless I'm missing the point.
Well, Jeremy, I agree entirely with your analysis, and I agree with what Jojo has just said about Netanyahu behaving in a childish fashion. And I'm sure you're right that if there were peace and if this war had not taken place, Prime Minister Netanyahu would no longer be Prime Minister. So he has, as one might say, some skin in this dreadful game. I also think that the conflict which took place, and let us not forget that it is Hamas who are responsible for what is going on in Gaza, the appalling loss of life there. Hamas are responsible. Their brutal murder of 1,200 Israeli citizens just enjoying themselves and going about their ordinary lives is utterly, utterly despicable and unforgivable, and Israel is entirely right to go after them. However, what we are seeing on our screens does not look like precision bombing. It looks like saturation bombing. And Israel has a lot of precision weapons. So I do not understand why this war is being prosecuted in this way. And I also believe that the objective which the Israeli government has set itself, the elimination of Hamas, was always going to be unattainable. You cannot wipe out Hamas. And by inflicting this conflict upon the Gazan people, the Palestinians there, all you're doing is actually acting as a recruiting sergeant for Hamas. I think it's really up to the Arab world. The Arab world needs to take a much stronger stance against Hamas. They have allowed Hamas to build up their power, to build all these tunnels, often with money provided by other Arab countries. They need to take control of this and make sure that Hamas does not re-emerge.
Sir Gerald, to what extent do you think that protests and public calls for a ceasefire have impacted this kind of decision-making? Not necessarily UK protests, but protests in the US. It's obvious that US representatives are feeling the pressure of the public, the majority of whom want to see an eventual peace.
Well, I think that 100% of us, not 100% of us, but 90% of us want to see an eventual peace. I don't think the protests have had the slightest influence on the British government. I cannot speak for the United States government. I do not think they've had any influence here. I think, if anything, they have upset a lot of British people. I was talking to somebody the other day who said, I just do not go to London now. My friends and I do not want to go to London on a Saturday. Our capital city has been taken over. And it's very notable that all those protesting about what is going on in Gaza, again, the responsibility of Hamas, not the responsibility of the Israeli government. They're not people who've been out on the streets protesting at the brutality of President Putin, the way that he has destroyed civilian enclaves in
But Sir Gerald, with respect,
Ukraine.
We're not providing arms to Russia, are we? And we don't, well, we did have a resettlement agreement with the Ukrainians, something that has not been offered for Palestinian people.
Yes, we do have a resettlement arrangement for the Ukrainian people, and it's right and proper. We have an agreement with Ukraine. And as does Russia, the Budapest Memorandum of 1995, signed by Boris Yeltsin on behalf of Russia, by Bill Clinton on behalf of the United States, and by John Major on behalf of the United Kingdom. No Germany, no France, it was just us. And under that arrangement, in return for giving out the weapons are Ukraine's independence and an obligation there, which does not apply in the case of Gaza.
So, Joe, just a sec, because your line, my friend, is just jumping out. If I can just see if we can check that. If we went to Joe time a minute, just a couple of things I wanted to say. Interestingly, you said at the end that resolution yesterday did not include the condemnation of Hamas. But I just want to make a wider comment, and I'd like everybody's reaction. I get absolutely what Sir Gerald said about October the 7th, and we'll sit here forever and say that's fine, right and proper. I absolutely understand globally people will look at those pictures and go, this needs to be sorted. But to me, whoever jumps up and down, whether there's resolutions, whether there's marches, the truth is that a ceasefire is only going to happen if the two component parts of that war want a ceasefire. And maybe I'm missing the point, my friends, but I'm not convinced that Hamas or Israel want a ceasefire right now, not at all.
Well, Hamas have agreed, I believe, but Israel not to these particular terms. Is that correct, Yotam?
First of all, yes. What's interesting is that what Israel could get from this resolution is far better than what they're currently negotiating with Hamas in Qatar. The deal that's on the table, which Hamas, by the way, dismissed this morning, was a ceasefire, a 6-week ceasefire with the exchange of 40 hostages and 700 to 800 Palestinian prisoners, 100 of whom were convicted of murder. That deal is horrific compared to what the ceasefire actually calls for. The ceasefire says simply a truce until the Ramadan is over, the release of all hostages. It doesn't talk about the release of any Palestinian criminals or murderers. So the ceasefire is far better for Israel, and still Prime Minister Netanyahu is choosing to lash out at the United States, to call this ridiculous, basically, and to not support it. And Hamas, of course, is much smarter. Hamas is welcoming this and saying, well, this is a great resolution, although they will never abide by it. But at least they come off as much more rational, which is insane.
We have essentially a war where people are losing their lives with politicians and countries posturing.
Yeah.
What does that say? Can I just, sorry, Nick, do you want to do that? Just would love Sir Gerald's reaction to that news just in. Hamas leader, how do you say that? I don't know. Anyway, a Hamas leader has travelled to Tehran for meetings with Iranian officials, we've just heard down the line.
Well, very interesting, Jeremy, because it's very important that people understand that all these organizations, Hezbollah, Hamas, and the Houthis, they are all beneficiaries of funding from Iran. Iran is the evil player in all of this. They have spent their time funding these terrorist groups who've been acting as proxies for them, destabilizing the whole of the Middle East. They really are an outrageous country, and what a shame that such lovely people as so many of the Persians are, led by a bunch of madmen who are inflicting this damage and indeed provoking it. So it'd be very interesting to see what they're telling Hamas, but I doubt they're telling Hamas, oh, please lay down your arms and please arrange for a ceasefire to take place in Gaza. I do not believe that Iran will be doing that.
And I should imagine as well, for the families of the hostages, that'd be very, very upsetting to hear that there has been certainly an offer on the table and it's been rejected. Well, thank you so much.
Yeah, thank you, guys.
Yotam Confino from Jewish News and former Defence Minister Gerald Howarth. Thank you both. Still to